Honk shoe, honk shoe. Hello, sleeping beauty. That mask really blocked the light out. And if you're anything like me, as I get older, I'm sensitive to light, I'm sensitive to sound, but I deserve a restful night. So I made this eye mask to help me sleep better. You should make one too. For an eye mask, you can find free patterns online pretty readily. Once you find a pattern that you like, then you can grab a fabric. Today we're going to be using cotton because we want more of a quilted look, but you can also use a satin or a sateen or a polyester, whatever you want. We're also going to be using a stabilizer because we want that quilted look. So what we're using today instead of batting, we're using our product Stitch Enhancer. So essentially it's like a fusible batting that you can stick onto your projects, making it like a lot easier instead of pinning your batting. To put our eye mask together, we're going to be using our 40 weight polyester thread called Designer. It comes in 210 colors, so it's perfect for a project like this. We are also going to be using our thicker 12 weight thread called Spaghetti. So we're going to quilt with that to show more of like an outstanding look that pops. So once you place your pattern where you want it on your fabric, I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. You can mark around it if you want. I just like to pin it, be a little lazy. Most patterns will have seam allowance built in. For ours, it's about 1 centimeter. Okay. Yeah, just let all your fabric fall off the table onto the ground. Okay, so I've got 2 pieces for the mask. I've got 1 tube for my back strap. Instead of batting, we're going to be using the Stitch Enhancer. This is essentially a fusible batting that you can use, which is a lot nicer to keep things in place instead of having to pin them. I'm only going to be using 1 piece of Stitch Enhancer because we're quilting the front of the eye mask only. For this, I like to measure around with a... For this, I like to measure around with a pen. Try the best you can. Yeah, pretty close. It might be controversial to use fabric scissors because there is glue on the back, but it should be fine because we haven't fused anything yet, so. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and just fuse that right away onto one wrong side of my mask. I like to look at the top view first, make sure everything looks pretty good. It's gonna be pretty cute. Flip that around so you don't have any glue stick to your iron. You can also use like a piece of cotton or something just to protect your iron a little bit more if you're nervous. Since we're using cotton, you can iron on a pretty hot setting with the Stitch Enhancer. If you were using like something fancy like a silk or even some polyester, you might want to just make sure your iron setting is good. So we have a front piece. We have a front piece with the Stitch Enhancer, we have a back piece, and then we have the strapping piece. To put the eye mask together, we're going to just be using our 40 weight Designer thread. So the Designer is a great all-purpose option. It's a 40 weight, and we have 210 colors. So for kind of general projects, and this is just like a polyester, this is a great option. With the Designer, we're going to be using a 9014 needle. For our bobbin, we're going to be using our BERNINA jumbo size B bobbin. We're going to take our strapping rectangle and we're going to fold this in half into a tube. And then I'm gonna sew this at about a 5mm seam allowance. I'm using a 2.5 stitch length. This is like a really generic stitch, so you can make it tighter, especially if you have like a silk or something, if you want to make sure your stitches look tight. I'm back stitching at both ends so that when I pull the elastic through, I don't have to worry about the seam shredding. Okay, I have my tube sewn with a little bit of a seam allowance, and I did check my elastic that it will fit in this channel. If you're kind of playing around with a different elastic size, just make sure it'll fit in this channel. So our pattern said to use about 30 centimeters worth of elastic. I'm actually cutting mine down a bit to like 27, 28 centimeters. First of all, I have a small head. And second of all, I mean, you can adjust it to what you want, but you want the back to kind of scrunch up as like a decorative feature. So I made mine a bit smaller. You can also see, like, I want my elastic to be smaller than my tube so that it'll scrunch up in the elastic. So next step, after cutting my elastic, I'm actually gonna pull this so it's right sides out. I'm going to use the safety pin to turn this right side out, or you can use a loop turner. So I'm gonna safety pin part of my tube from the inside. And then you stick the safety pin in. So you're kind of sticking the safety pin in, and you're bunching up the fabric and just pulling it over as you go to kind of create this little hole. And then as you pull the safety pin through, it's gonna go further in. Like I said, a loop turner would actually be a better tool for this, but most people will have safety pins laying around. I've also seen people use the straw method, so you use like a straw and you push it through the straw with something like a pen or an awl. Alright, so then it's coming out on the right side. We're just gonna pull our whole tube through like that and then take the safety pin off. Now I'm gonna iron this really quick, just so that's a little bit more flat and just to get some of those wrinkles out from turning it over. I'm gonna iron it with the seam in the middle because then you won't be able to see it from the back or from the right side. You can also iron it with the seam at the top if you want, whatever you prefer. If you're an extra perfectionist, you might want to try to iron your seam open when it's in the tube first. It is a bit hard when it's a narrow tube, but if you iron the seam open first, it would also create a pretty crisp line. But I think that looks pretty good. The checkers help because you can easily sew in a straight line. That's a hack. Okay, looks good. Alright, so I've got my tube all done. Now I'm gonna insert my elastic. So I'm gonna do a similar method using the safety pin. I'm gonna stick it through the elastic. Give yourself a good amount of space down so that if it starts to fray or something, you don't have to worry. I'm just gonna stick it right in and feed this through the tube. So this is a mistake you want to avoid. Accidentally pulling your elastic all the way through. Thankfully, I was able to grab the end here. So once you get to the end, I would pin this. So pinning it flush with the edge of the fabric like this, then pulling the rest of the elastic through. So now this part is going to be flush as well. Take off the pin, and then I'm going to kind of push this so that it's flush in this seam as well, and I'm gonna pin that one as well. And then there's not a ton of ruching. You could make this rectangle a little bit longer or shorter if you want this to be like more of a decorative feature, but you can kind of see making the elastic smaller creates this cute little like ruched strap. So we have the elastic in line with the seam, and we're just gonna sew just to kind of tack the elastic in there. So once again, we can just do this on 2.5. Make sure when you take your pin out, you got a good hold on the elastic so that it's not gonna go into the tube. I just do a couple back stitches so that I know it's gonna be in place, just like so. Now that we have this done, we're gonna go ahead and quilt the front of the eye mask so that we can attach this strapping onto the front. Alright, to quilt the front of the eye mask, we're gonna be using our 12-weight variegated cotton called Fruitti. I may have gotten a little excited and I misspoke and said spaghetti. They're essentially the same thing, but this is just variegated to add a little bit more interest. So I'm gonna thread this now with the Fruitti. Fruitti is a thicker thread, so you just wanna be cautious when you're using it to try out a bigger needle if needed. So I'm gonna start with a 90-14. And if I need to, I will increase to a 100 size needle. I suggested doing it on the diagonal. I'm a little nervous about my skill level. So right now, I just have the front of my mask that has the stitch enhancer attached to it. This is the only piece that we're gonna be quilting. When you're using a thicker thread as well, you're gonna wanna increase your stitch length. Because it's thicker, you don't want the stitches to be too tight, so I've increased mine to 3.5, and I'm just doing a straight stitch. So I'm quilting mine on the diagonal, but you can already see how bold this thread is. It's really gonna give you a really pretty decorative feature for your quilting. With a thicker thread, it's kind of nice to hold the back of the tail sometimes too when you first start your stitch if you're a little nervous, because if it gets sucked up, then it is a little bit harder when it's a thick thread. Something fun about this project is you can really decorate it in whatever way you want. So we're quilting it. You could embroider it if you have that ability. You could hand embroider it. You can really do any design that you want. But this is just kind of what we've decided design-wise. You can really play. You can also add like ruffles, you can add sparkles, beads, anything that you kind of think represents you a little bit. Or if you're giving it as a gift, maybe glam it out for your bestie. This is a realistic moment. I'm totally failing and I'm not even meeting the squares. Oh well, I think it's hidden pretty well. Mine has mistakes, and that's what makes it fun. That's what gives it its personality. It's not perfect. We finished the front of our eye mask, so I'm happy with how I decorated it. Now I'm going to stick the back strapping. Just with a pin, I'm going to pin the sides of the eye mask front to the back strap. Making sure that you have this excess. This is just gonna get bunched up in the middle. I put the seam of my strap to the back. So as you can see, I'm gonna be doing right sides together. For this, it doesn't necessarily matter, but if you want that seam to kind of be hidden in your hair, then you're gonna wanna have it like this. So the seam is up right now. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take the back piece. For me, I have an obvious right and wrong side, so we're gonna be doing right sides together, just like usual. So you have this bulk for the strap. This will just stay within the middle, even though it looks a little funny. You just wanna make sure that you pin around and catch this strap where you want it here. So right now I have the strap sandwiched between the two mask pieces. Make sure your strap stays contained in the middle here. Alright, now I have this pinned all the way around. I'm gonna sew this at a 1 centimeter seam allowance, or for me, against the presser foot edge. I'm going to be leaving a gap at the bottom, probably about 1 to 2 inches, so that you can pull all of this through to the right side. Make sure you backstitch your opening so that when you pull it through, you don't worry about ripping your stitches. Make sure you turn your stitch length back to 2.5 if you increased it for your quilting. If you were using a finer thread as well, like Deco Bob or WonderFil, you can even make your stitch length smaller, like 1.5. Now for me personally, when I'm going over straps of any kind, making a bag or something like this, I'm gonna actually backstitch over the entirety of that strap piece, just for a little extra security. You can go back around after you do one pass over to backstitch it if you like as well. Here we go. So like I said, I've stitched all the way around, leaving a gap that I've backstitched. So since this piece is curved, when you pull it through, there might be a little extra bulk around the curved pieces, especially like the sides. So we're gonna cut little notches out of where the curve is the most. I'm also gonna cut a little bit of bulk here, so we have a bit of extra elastic and stuff sticking out. So I'm going to trim a little bit of this out of the seam allowance. And then we're just gonna cut triangle notches, making sure to leave this opening pretty clear from cuts. We don't wanna have anything that's kind of raw close to this opening because we're gonna turn it through here. Make sure to be careful here because if you cut too close to the seam, then you might have to reinforce it. You don't want to have anything cut too close and then ruin your project. This is essentially just taking bulk out of the seam so that when you turn it over, the edges aren't all floppy. Now this might be a bit excessive, I think, but since you're using like either a batting or for our case this creative medium, you're gonna have a little bit of extra bulk from that, so you kind of want to reduce as much as you can so that it'll lay flat. Also, a pro tip is to just use pinking shears or something like that. So a pinking shear essentially is like scissors that have triangles cut into them. You can use that for something like this as well. Just go over the whole thing, like the whole seam allowance with your pinking shears. That'll also kind of help with this problem a little bit too. Also a side note from before, but the stitch enhancer, what I used instead of batting, is really nice for something like this because it's not super bulky, it irons on, and then it still gives you that kind of quilted look that a batting would give, but you don't have to worry about pinning it or anything like that since it fuses. So it's nice for small projects like this or things like bags. Kind of general or small, like small art pieces, things like that. All right, so I've just notched the sides. You can go a little above and beyond depending on your fabric if it seems really bulky. If you pull it through and you aren't happy with how it lays and stuff, trim out some of this seam allowance, you can cut more notches, whatever you gotta do to make it lay flat. All right, now we're gonna turn this inside out. So if we take a little peek in, we got right sides together. We know that the strap is also sandwiched in there. So we're gonna pull through this hole that we made. Just be careful, especially if you didn't backstitch, because this seam might pop a little bit, depending on how big of a hole you made. So just be extra careful. This is called the bagging out method as well. If you make bags or pillows or anything like that, same idea. So I pulled this right side out, but with my finger, I'm just gonna kind of go along the seam a little bit, push out the seams, kind of flattening them a little bit with my finger. Like this side is kind of all messed up, and this side I pushed out with my finger. So yeah, just kind of push it out. You can use different tools for this too. You can use like an awl or something, but just be careful not to poke a hole through the seam. All right. This is what we got roughly. This is the back, and then this would be the front. I'm gonna go ahead and iron this just to make it all laying flat. Make sure it's all laying flat and looks nice. I'm ironing first from the front side, just because obviously that's the side that you're gonna see. So I wanna take a little bit better care of this. I'm gonna flip it around after, just make sure if anything looks a little wonky, I'll fix it. So you can see, like, when you go to iron it, the hole kind of starts to pop out. So we can just kind of tuck that back in when we're ironing it. So now I feel pretty good about my ironing. And then the last point of business here is our hole that we left. So I'm just going to essentially fold this in. Depends on how precise you want to be. You can follow exactly where your seam allowance would be. I usually kind of eyeball it. You want to fold these edges in so that they meet essentially. And you can hand stitch this or you can top stitch it with your machine. So from the front side of the mask, I'm actually going to top stitch my hole closed on the machine because I'm lazy. And I'm going to top stitch around the whole thing just to make it a little bit more of a decorative feature. Alright, and there we go. I've top stitched the top. I closed up that hole at the same time. It adds a cute little extra feature of design. And we're all done! Oh, I gotta be real with you guys. I made the most beautiful eye mask, but reality struck, and I realized something unfortunate. The pattern lied, and I can't even get it over my head. Man, this is how it is sometimes. So the tip I'm gonna give is make sure your elastic can fit around your head and stretch, but the piece of fabric needs to be able to stretch over your whole head too. So make sure when you pick a pattern that it's actually accurate. I'm gonna try to fix this, but I'm very sad and I'm gonna cry later. So be cautious. This is a cautionary tale. I hope you're ready to tuck into bed like me. If you enjoyed this eye mask, comment below how restful sleep you got. Good night. I hope this sleep mask helps you have a restful night like me. Good night.
Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more great tips, tricks, and tutorials. You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter to get the first look at free projects, sewing tips, and inspiring tutorials delivered right to your inbox. Check out the description box below to sign up, as well as find a list of stores and retailers that you can purchase WonderFil threads from in your country.